still remember that moment so vividly, as if it were painted across the back of my eyelids, a scene that I couldn't unsee, no matter how hard I tried. I sat there in my bedroom, textbooks sprawled in front of me, under the dim glow of my desk lamp, struggling to focus on algebra equations that felt far more confusing than they should. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, a heavy blanket woven from years of feeling invisible. It was the last day of April. The air outside was warm, hinting at the onset of a summer that would undoubtedly be filled with more moments of neglect for me. I had always prided myself on sitting quietly at the edges of family moments, a wallflower in my own home, a ghost slipping through rooms unnoticed. My parents never missed a chance to praise Joe, my younger brother, an absolute whirlwind of charisma and charm that naturally drew their attention like a moth to a flame. "Clara, you could try harder, you know," my mom had said just days before, a hint of frustration lacing her tone during breakfast. I vividly recall how the spoon I held clattered against my cereal bowl, resonating with my bubbling anger. What was harder than knowing your efforts would forever be eclipsed by someone else's brilliance? Just then, the sound of laughter erupted from the living room, and I knew Joe was there, probably boasting about yet another trophy he'd received for his soccer prowess. The familiar pang of jealousy ricocheted through me with fierceness, and with a deep breath, I tried to shake it off and bury myself deeper in my homework. But beneath that facade of determination, the conversation came like a thief in the night, wrenching open wounds I had long tried to ignore. It drifted through the air, seeping into my ears, planting seeds of promise. "I just wish Clara would be more like Joe." I heard my mother voice her disappointment, the painful words piercing through my resolve. "He's going places, honey. I just don't see that for her." Even now, every syllable echoes in my mind, a cruel reminder that I would always be second best. In that heart-stopping moment, all the years of rejection crystallized into a vow. Joe was going to pay for this. Sitting there alone, I felt empowerment surge through me, an exhilarating rush as my mind began to spin tales of revenge, spinning webs of intricate plots. The first phase was mild, a single thread woven into the fabric of my brother's golden world. I thought back to how I crafted my initial notes, those letters I slipped discreetly into his soccer equipment bag, penmanship deliberately disguised, but the contents sharpened like daggers. "Can't believe you missed that penalty kick last week," one read. "What a shame the coach saw you slacking during practice. Guess you should cut back on all those video games." My heart raced with anticipation, a concoction of fear and satisfaction, as I envisioned the look in my parents' eyes when the golden child stumbled and faltered. I watched him, carefully monitoring the cracks in his radiant facade that began to form. Joe, so used to receiving praise, didn't even realize the tides were shifting until he tripped over his pride, caught off guard by a remark from one of his friends during practice one afternoon. Yeah, I heard you've been playing less than usual," his friend smirked, and I nearly grinned, but instead took a sip of my juice, trying to play it cool while my heart sang a victorious tune. Seriously, he shot back, a hint of disbelief in his voice. Who told you that? The tremor in his voice was music to my ears, the first soft crack of his perfect glass facade. You know I train hard, right? I suppressed a smile as I thought about my next move. The more I watched him squirm, the more I reveled in my rebirth from the shadows, returning the neglect I had so long suffered. I wanted to dissect his world piece by piece, dismantle the idol my family had built, and expose the child dressed in cobwebs and shadows. When I laid the idea for the party on our family dinner table, I leaned back in my chair, feigning nonchalance. My father and mother were deeply engrossed in a conversation about their own friends' gatherings. And for once, Joe looked bored with the adult wormhole we often found ourselves drifting into. How about we throw a party for Joe, just like the old days? I suggested, glancing quickly at him, watching his face light up like a 4th of July firework, igniting across the dark sky. Seriously, a party? That'd be awesome. Joe's enthusiasm was palpable. How quickly the notion rolled off his tongue, like he was made for attention, every word dripping with joy, unaware of the brewing storm in my mind. In that blissful moment, I could see him float away, a golden boy untethered from reality. My parents beamed, glowing with pride at the prospect of showing off their youngest child, unaware that I had set my plan into motion. Great idea, Clara, my dad exclaimed, nodding with approval. We should invite all his friends. Make it a big celebration. I struggled to keep my expression neutral, biting the inside of my cheek to hide my triumphant grin. I felt like a puppet master pulling strings with a devilish smile, eager to orchestrate the beautiful chaos that was coming. Inside, my mind pulsated with the possibilities. I envisioned the party as a spectacle, his friends crowding into our home, their laughter echoing like a haunting melody. Joe, in his relaxed and carefree way, would be entrusted with all the responsibilities, and I could foresee him fielding the ball as carelessly as he lived life. I watched him happily chatter away about guest lists, planning the food and picking music, all while I formulated my master plan, the pieces sinking into place like a vintage puzzle. However, I couldn't simply wait for the evening to unfold. Oh no, that would be far too easy. I needed to lay the groundwork beforehand. So as the days passed, I began leaving little reminders, feathering fragments of doubt. Each note casually crafted and placed in secret corners of his bag, notes reading things like, "Can't wait for the party. Heard you're going to forget the snacks again." Kept him on his toes. "What happens if no one shows up? Bet you'll be crushed." Joe began to wear the signs of stress, clutching his backpack a bit tighter each day, his laughter now tinged with uncertainty. I noticed the way he conversed with friends, always defensively rallying against the whispers in the air. Perhaps it was guilt, or maybe the dawning realization that not everyone was consistently impressed by him. I needed him teetering on the edge before the main event. The night of the party arrived with all the spirits swirling like leaves caught in a blustery wind. I could still feel the electricity in the air, that flurry of excitement tinged with apprehension that danced in my chest. I barely contained my glee as I watched him scuttle around the house, with guests starting to arrive. The lights were strung across the backyard, twinkling like stars in the night. As the grill sizzled with burgers and hot dogs, guests animatedly mingled, laughter skyrocketing and merging into a symphony of festive joy. "How's it going, buddy?" I asked Joe while pouring drinks for everyone. The glint in my eye must have betrayed my delight, but I feigned a concerned tone, ensuring he remained oblivious to my intentions. "Great. Just get the playlist ready, yeah," he chirped, his enthusiasm ringing infectious notes. The air tasted sweet with the scent of grilled food, but underneath it all, my whimsical thoughts danced in dark shades. "Of course," I replied, deliberately keeping my back to him. "You should probably check on the drinks," I added, sipping my soda, my lips curling into a smirk as he nodded, oblivious to the impending breakdown of his effortless charm. I watched him hurry away, searching for that elusive thrill of approval, completely unaware of the game being played around him. The guests surrounding the yard were buoyant and carefree, yet I could sense Joe's anxiety rising as I saw the clock inch closer towards the tipping point. As he arrived back with their supplies, I then noticed the moment Joe realized he had neglected the most basic hosting duties. Virtually, no one moved towards the table that had long been prepared. Realization dawned on his face like a dark cloud, and in a cruel twist of fate, it was exactly what I had wanted, an opportunity for him to stumble hard and contrast sharply against the backdrop of his usual glory. "Hey Joe, where's the cake?" a friend screamed over the noise. "I thought you had it." Joe's voice wavered, echoing the panic that was engulfing him. Now, I couldn't help but how my heart raced with dark excitement. And the more anxious he got, the more tense the room became, each laugh soon morphing into whispers of disbelief. I felt almost alive watching him drown in the chaos, my skin tingling with each successful jab of humiliation. The party had turned into a storm, every gust brewing as laughter morphed into chuckles, and I could see the glances shifting towards him like arrows. Each second that passed chipped away at the golden facade they had built around him. "Can you believe it? Joe forgot the cake," another guest exclaimed, and like wildfire, a wave of laughter rolled through the backyard, a sound I had waited years to witness. My brother suddenly hanging on a cliff of his own making, all the years of favoritism swiftly crashing down around him. In that moment, as the tension soared like the pitch of the night, my heart was filled with a bittersweet joy, a mixture of frenzied anticipation and a sense of triumph heating through my veins. It was time everyone knew the truth. The evening of Joe's party arrived, with a thick layer of anticipation hanging in the air. I stood nearby, surveying the scene, a grin creeping across my face as the door swung open to welcome the first wave of guests. Laughter filled our home, a sweet melody that paralleled the chaos I knew would soon ensue. The living room was a riot of color, the decorations a stark contrast to the dark, heavy emotions I had carried for years. My brother, oblivious and ecstatic, was the center of it all, dancing in the flickering lights, robe flapping, as he wove between friends who shouted unbelievably loud over the blaring speakers. The place took on a vibrant energy, one I had initially craved for myself, but now transformed into something delightfully destructive. My heart raced with a delicious thrill as I imagined the explosion of emotions that awaited when our parents came home. Hours passed, and the chaos unfolded just as I had orchestrated. By the time our mother and father walked through the front door, returning from their seemingly endless dinner party, the atmosphere shifted from festive to frigid in an instant. They were greeted by the sight of our carpeted floor, now marred with dark stains from spilled drinks, a clear testament to the reckless joy that filled the room. The furniture stood perilously askew, as if knocked questions into disarray, while the remnants of a wild night hung heavy in the air like a thick fog. Bubbles of laughter fizzled out, giving way to a haunting realization of what they had returned to. I positioned myself near the staircase, watching intently. My heart thudded in my chest, an electric thrum of excitement as I observed the look of horror wash over my parents' faces like an uninvited wave crashing onto shore. Their world, which they had so meticulously controlled, was suddenly out of their grasp, an unruly tempest that threatened to tear apart the facade of our perfect family. It was a beautiful sight, and I couldn't help but feed off their shock, relishing every stolen moment. My dad's jaw clenched visibly. I had never seen him with such a fierce expression, a mixture of disbelief, disappointment, and something darker lurking just beneath the surface. His brown eyes hardened like flint as they bore into Joe, who stood there wide-eyed and helpless, searching for excuses like an animal cornered in the depths of despair. The position of power had shifted. This was my moment, the beginning of my revenge. I stayed quiet, my thoughts a chaotic swirl, a shadow in the room as my parents confronted him. Each word they spoke sliced through the tension like a knife, sharp and unforgiving. "What happened here, Joe?" my father demanded, his voice dripping with an intensity I had never heard directed toward him before. My father had always been strong, a commanding presence, a man whose rules had governed our lives like a king in a castle. But now, the castle walls had crumbled, and I reveled in the cracks that appeared beneath my brother's facade. Joe stammered, struggling to piece together a coherent narrative that would stave off the inevitable backlash. I just invited some friends over. I thought it would be okay." His voice trembled as he tried to maintain some semblance of control, the panic bubbling beneath the surface. But the excuses he conjured faltered under the weight of their scrutiny, the silence hanging heavy like a guillotine waiting for the final drop. I felt a sense of triumph swell within me, blossoming in my chest. For once, Joe was the one facing the music, not me. He always danced through life, the easy one, the favored son. But tonight, the scales were tilting, and I was ready to watch it happen. I could see my mother shaking her head, her eyes reflecting a shifting landscape of emotions, disappointment, realization, and perhaps a tad of fear. Each moment that passed felt electric, charged with the energy of my vindication. Joe's world, once an untouchable fortress, was crumbling before me. I could feel a part of my heart soar, uncoiling the knots of jealousy that had intertwined themselves around me for years. The tangled past of feeling neglected, cast aside like an old toy in favor of my brother's glimmering brilliance, was finally dismantling in a single evening of chaotic beauty. Joe squirmed under the weight of that revelation, and I could see his mind racing, trying to recapture the lost ground. "I thought it was just going to be a few friends," he repeated, his voice hardly making it past a whisper. No one needed to tell him that a toxic concoction of recklessness had taken the night over. My mother sighed, her expression stark, a mixture of heartbreak and firmly pressed lips. "Joe," she began, her voice trembling slightly with the care of a mother. "We trusted you too much," she whispered, the words hanging painfully in the air like a noose tightening around my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. For the first time, my parents were viewing him not as the revered golden child, but as a careless boy in need of guidance. I could barely contain my excitement as my heart raced. This unexpected freedom was intoxicating. The roles had reversed. As they addressed him, I felt liberated, unshackled from the chains of my own resentment and obligation. It was as if I had been a caged bird all this time, and now the door was flung wide open. I had set in motion the course of events that had finally revealed Joe's flaws. I had painted a picture of reality that no longer belonged to shadows of jealousy. I thought of all those years of watching as Joe floated effortlessly through life. Homework handed in flawlessly, awards stacked high, popularity gleamed off him like a polished trophy. While I sat in the shadows, invisible and quiet, my identity lost in the monolithic figure of my brother. But not this time. I watched Joe's face crumple under the weight of a new reality, the one I had meticulously created for him. My mother took a step closer, her voice laced with concern. "What were you thinking, Joe? Do you even understand the consequences of what you've done?" She glanced around the living room, a battlefield now strewn with evidence of debauchery. We could get in huge trouble for this. What if someone got hurt? What if the neighbors called the police? The fear in her tone finally broke through the veneer of Joe's careless facade. Tears glistened in his eyes, shimmering like dewdrops on a blade of grass in the morning sun. And in that moment, I felt something shift even further within myself, a strange sense of power, a rush of exhilaration. Just then, a friend of Joe's stumbled towards him, arms flailing comically, a red cup held precariously in either hand. The boy's laughter echoed through the living room, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, oblivious to the devastation woven through the air like a sickly sweet perfume. "Hey man, this party is epic. Your parents won't even know," he called out loudly, causing both our parents to turn toward him in shock. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, a perfect blend of hilarity and horror. My father's expression darkened further, his anger boiling beneath the surface. Who invited you in here?" he thundered, the tone sending a shiver down my spine. It caused the party-goer to falter, eyes darting like a deer caught in headlights. Joe stammered again, his previous bravado melting away like ice under the hot sun. I didn't invite them, I swear. But it was too late. My parents had caught the scent of rebellion, and their ire was about to explode. "This is why we can't trust you," my father erupted, the words slashing through Joe's tangled web of excuses. "This is why we keep saying no. Look at what you have done. You think this is just fun and games. You have put yourself and your friends in danger." His voice was a whirlpool of fear and fury, sending shockwaves through the room. I could see Joe shrinking away, his shoulders tightening. A boy who once wore confidence like a king's crown, now a mere wretch at his father's feet. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this out of hand," he pleaded, his voice small, quaking beneath the shadows of my parents' disappointment. But it was no use. Like wolves circling their prey, my parents were relentless in their assault, their disappointment morphing into anger like a fierce storm brewing on the horizon. My mother's glare was undoubtedly icy. "You should have thought of that before. You reveled in your own freedom without thinking of the consequences. We can't care for someone who won't care for themselves." The room was thick with silence, punctuated only by the heavy atmosphere of realization weighing down on Joe. Could he even wrap his mind around the gravity of the situation? I stepped back slowly, sliding seamlessly into the shadows. My heart thrummed with satisfaction, a subtle echo of triumph. In this moment, Joe was alone, unmasked, and uncovered. This time, there were no more excuses. Each of his mistakes unfolded grotesquely, blooming like an ugly flower, revealing petals of carelessness that had been hidden behind a curtain of bravado. The scales had shifted. I felt my own resentment begin to evaporate like mist in the early morning sun. I had orchestrated this masterpiece of chaos, and now I could finally confront the truth of my own feelings. As the storm surged around Joe, the weight of their judgment dropped like a hammer, causing me to inhale sharply. It was thrilling and terrifying to witness, but I savored it all the same. I watched as my parents stood strong, united against him in a way they had never been with me. I had dared to unleash the storm, and chaos had come to roost. I could hardly believe it, but I was finally free. In those moments, I realized that this was not merely revenge. It was something much deeper, a reckoning for years of lost and overlooked feelings. I had fashioned my own justice from the clay of discontent. And as the night unraveled, I found myself eager to step into the light. At last, no longer in Joe's shadow in the weeks that followed, the atmosphere around our home became a thick fog, where words hung heavily like a storm brewing just out of reach. I found myself drifting through the chaos, watching as my parents began to analyze every little thing about Joe, the very flaws I had wanted to bring to the surface. It was ironic, really. The surge of their newfound scrutiny, which had me feeling victorious at first, soon became a heavy chain dragging me down into a pool of regret. I had set out intending to assert my place in the family, wanting the love and attention I perceived as being unfairly diverted to him. But as I observed the bitter shift, my heart recoiled in shame. Dinner time used to be a chorus of laughter and animated discussions. Now, it resembled a funeral more than a family gathering. A storm cloud cast its shadow over our dining table. Instead of the warm aroma of a home-cooked meal blending with stories of our day, there were only vague murmurs about monotonous things, the kind of conversations people had when they were trapped in the silence of their thoughts. I could hear Joe pushing his peas around the plate, each little click of his fork against the ceramic punctuating the tension that loomed in the air. It reminded me of the countless times I had done the same, desperately seeking a way to be noticed, when he would casually parade his way into our parents' approval. Now, Joe was getting that attention on a plate, but he was far from deserving it. "Did you finish that project for school, Joe?" our mother asked, her voice quivering as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had settled like dust over our kitchen. "Yeah," he mumbled, hardly making eye contact as he shoved his plate away with a backhanded gesture, as if he were trying to dismiss all the attention away from himself. "What do you mean, yeah? Did you put in the effort you promised?" "Leave him alone," I interjected. A flash of irritation ignited my heart as I felt the old familiar jealousy rising again. But there was an ache somewhere deep in my chest that warned me against it. I was still in thrall to my vengeance, but now I held a mirror to my guilt. "Clara, we need to see that he is doing better. He doing better." My voice sliced through the silence like a serrated knife, bringing all eyes on me. "Do you even realize how he's drowning under the pressure you are adding? He just needs you to be there." "I am trying," she shouted back, her frustration spilling over, her face turning red with anger that felt so misplaced, but so right at the same time. "You don't see him," I whispered. A tightness in my throat made my words bitter, but truth was bitter sometimes. "I don't see him," she echoed incredulously. "I see him a lot more than you do lately. You are the one who has stayed invisible ever since all of this." Her gaze drifted toward Joe, the hurt in her eyes palpable. I held my breath. She didn't finish, but the implication was there, pulsating like a drumbeat in my ears. I slumped back onto my chair, aware to the depth of the abyss that my actions had opened. I wanted to absolve myself of the guilt, to reclaim the close bond I once shared with my family. And yet, I sat there watching the way Joe withered each day, becoming more withdrawn than I had ever seen him. It was like observing a flower close in upon itself, losing its vibrancy, and I had to look away to stifle the guilt clawing at me. Days turned to weeks, and with each passing sunset, I could feel the tears I had held at bay begin to swell beneath my eyelids. I was quick to shed them when alone, hiding my remorse beneath the guise of indifference. When night enveloped the house, I often crept to the family photo album, an artifact of times when our connection felt unbreakable. Among the snapshots was one of our family just before I had begun to resent Joe's effortless charm. We stood against the backdrop of a summer sky, our smiles almost crystalline, promising, filled with the warmth of a love that permeated our home. Yet, standing there now, it was a ghost of happiness I feared could never return. One night, after yet Another suffocating dinner marked only by heavy sighs and furtive glances. I was unable to keep the haunting regret from my mind. I climbed the stairs and flopped down on my bed, surrounded by the familiar clutter of childhood toys and memories that suddenly felt foreign. I should have been angry. I had given them what they wanted. But each time I saw Joe's shadow blend into the hallway, my heart wrenched with despair. What was the point of revenge if it cost me my family? I wandered to my door, curiosity tugging me along. I had never eavesdropped before, but that night, a gnawing dread surged through me, a compulsion stronger than my own morals. The hallway was dimly lit, casting shadows that twisted and turned, seemingly alive as I pressed my ear to the doorframe, straining to hear the hushed echoes of my parents discussing something ominous. "What do we do with him?" My father's voice was tinged with worry, swollen with fear for his son. "Maybe a boarding school. It could be what he needs," my mother murmured, her voice low, but it tinged with uncertainty, and I felt the earth beneath me shift uneasily. "He needs discipline, a place where he can learn the value of responsibility," my father asserted, but each word sent a shard of ice straight through my heart. Boarding school. The thought chased itself around my mind like a terrible specter, taunting me. If they sent Joe away, it would be a betrayal of the worst kind. It was like a cruel twist of fate. I had conjured up this dark writing with the intention to be seen, to be recognized, only to realize my brother was slowly disappearing from our lives. The boy I once viewed as my rival was now veering toward a different life altogether. No, we can't do this, I thought, squeezing my eyes shut as if that would make the conversation dissolve like morning fog. How could they even consider this? My heart thudded heavily against my ribcage as panic whispered in my ear, the kind that felt solid and unyielding, like the ground crumbling beneath my feet. He would be gone, lost among the students and towering buildings of a distant campus where I couldn't protect him. My vision blurred as anger crept in, a whisper growing louder in my thoughts. This was producing a fracture to our family I had never intended to create, and the chaos was spiraling out of control. I stepped back from the door, heart racing, feeling dizzy. I couldn't stand there and let it happen. It felt like my world was collapsing, shattering into a million shards of glass, impossible to reassemble. I realized the need for action, but what? I had only wanted to expose the truth, to show them the brother who had soared effortlessly in their affection, while I clung to their shadows. Instead, I had thrown our entire family off balance completely. I felt the weight of my unspooled revenge pressing down on my shoulders, suffocating me, threatening to drown me. I didn't know how long I stood there, but eventually I made my way to my room, a silent volcano preparing to erupt within, a pulse of anger swirling, laced with guilt, and a painful realization also simmering just below the surface. I was afraid of the kind of sister I had become. All I wished for now was to regain the laughter, the joy, and the bonds we forged. And instead, I set off a chain of events that could rip our family apart forever. As I sank into my bed, grappling with despair and uncertainty, I knew that I had to make a choice. This was not just about revenge anymore. This was about love, redemption, and somehow trying to undo what I had done. It had to be worth something. The day that Joe was set to leave loomed over our family like a dark cloud. I spent the hours leading up to that moment in a haze, my mind spiraling in conflicting thoughts, tormented by regret and concern. The air itself seemed heavy, thick with the weight of my choices. I did not know whether to feel relief that our parents would finally see Joe for who he was, a boy hiding behind layers of charm and bravado, or despair that I was about to lose him for good. As I struggled to process my thoughts, I felt a tight knot of anguish forming in my stomach, twisting tighter with every passing hour. I could not bear the thought of this gaping emptiness that would follow his departure. Unable to simply wait for Joe to leave, I found myself driving to the boarding school. The imposing building was like an executioner standing in the wings, waiting to carry out a sentence I had facilitated. I imagined Joe standing there vulnerable, yet still filled with that reckless charm that had always drawn me to him. When I arrived, he was outside, bags in tow, just as I feared and expected. His expression was unreadable. It flickered through a kaleidoscope of emotions I could not decipher. My heart raced as I stepped out of the car, and as I crossed the gravel path leading to him, tears welled in my eyes, threatening to spill like a dam breaking. "This is all my fault," I whispered, the words escaping me before I could stop them. The invisible tension that had built between us over the past few months shattered, and I could feel its shards in the air around us. Both beautiful and painful, Joe looked up, surprise etched on his features. "Clara, why are you here?" His voice quivered, the uncertainty rolling off him like palpable energy. There was something haunting in his gaze, a mixture of confusion and hurt that struck me to the core. "I never meant for it to get this far," I admitted, the raw weight of regret flooding my heart like an endless tide. Each word felt like an admission of guilt, hanging in the air heavy and undeniable. "I just wanted our parents to see the truth." His expression began to shift. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind, the realization dawning on him. "But at what cost?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I am losing everything you and I shared. You broke us apart." The accusations were like arrows shot toward me, piercing through the lingering fog of regret. But instead of anger, a deeper sorrow spread through me, consuming my heart. So much had gone wrong, and I did not know how to fix it. This was never what I wanted. I wanted to scream, to explain, to untangle the mess I had created. Yet, all I could manage was a small, broken murmur. I thought I would feel free. His eyes, usually so bold and defiant, now reflected a pain that mirrored my own. But now it feels like chains are tethering me to this reality. What did I accomplish? I never wanted this. Every word I spoke hung in the air, filled with the weight of my desperation. I felt like a sailor lost at sea, grasping for anything solid to hold on to. Joe's gaze softened slightly as he listened to the tremor in my words, his shoulders dropping fractionally, as if the burden of my admission had lifted it just enough to allow a breath of understanding. "We both got lost in this, Clara," he said, a soft warmth creeping into his tone. But there is still time to make things right, to find a way back to each other. As I looked into his eyes, I began to see the possibility of redemption. The anger that I had thought would be our final verdict began to dissipate, replaced with a flicker of hope, as if someone had turned on a small light in a dark room. Delicate threads of possibilities began to weave together in my mind. Instead of revenge, I could build a bridge toward reconciliation. "I will not let you go, Joe," I said fiercely, determination igniting something deep within me. "I will fight for us, for our family, and we will find a way to fix this." My voice, once quaking with doubt, now surged with the power of conviction. He took a hesitant step toward me, and for a split second, I believed we could somehow rewind time to before I had set this twisted course in motion. The horizon glimmered with hope, a sunrise spilling light over the wreckage of our relationship. And as I stepped closer to him, I felt the heaviness lifting, like a weight slipping off my shoulders. I reached out, feeling as if I were building a bridge with my fingertips, and he took my hand, his grip igniting warmth within me, a flicker of something that we could still salvage. "Clara," he murmured, his voice a gentle balm against my jagged thoughts. "Do you really think we can come back from this?" The very question struck a chord in me, bringing a flood of memories, a laugh shared over a late-night snack, secrets whispered under the covers, dreams swapped like trading cards on a sunlit afternoon. "Yes," I said, and for the first time, I felt the sincere echo of that conviction resonate within me. "Absolutely. We just need to be honest, to communicate better." He frowned slightly, his brow furrowing as he processed my words. "But what about everything that has happened? All the times you felt I didn't listen or understand?" I could feel the weight of his stare, a mix of challenge and vulnerability, and I took a deep breath. I thought I needed to take a stand, to make a point. But in doing so, I misjudged everything, my feelings, your feelings. I never gave you a chance to explain yourself, and I pushed you away. Joe's eyes softened again, his hurt slowly being replaced by empathy, as if we were both standing on the edge of an iceberg, ready to cling to the remnants of warmth still radiating between us. "You were trying to protect our family, to shield yourself from the truth of who I had become," he said, and I could see the reflection of my own stormy emotions mirrored in his gaze. "But in the process, we lost each other, and you have me questioning everything I thought was real." With my heart pounding, I stepped closer still, the world around us quieting, as though we were in our own universe. "It feels like our connection was tested to the core, a flame that burned bright and fast. But maybe we will come out stronger for it," I said, my heart racing with the risk of vulnerability. "What if we turned this chaos into something new? Something worth building upon?" Joe's expression softened, and a ghost of a smile touched the corners of his mouth. "You really believe in us, don't you?" The question propelled me into a deeper wave of reflection, looking back at all the moments I had allowed fear to eclipse our love, to twist it into something unrecognizable. "I do. I believe we can learn and grow, even from this mess we are in. We just have to move forward together." For a moment, silence settled between us, thick like honey, sweet, and tangled with emotions that simmered just below the surface. I could feel the weight of his past decisions mingling with my own mistakes, a cluttered tapestry of emotions that had formed around us and our story. "And if we get hurt again?" he finally asked, the uncertainty creeping back into his voice. I knew what he meant: the fear of rejection, the haunting possibility of more pain, the abyss of lost love. "Then we get hurt together," I said, warmth spreading through me. "Isn't that worth it?" Joe studied my face, a swing of colors dancing in his gaze, blue, gray, even a little fire. "You're right. We cannot be afraid of what might be lost. Maybe this is our chance to redefine everything, to rebuild not just ourselves, but our entire relationship." At the thought, I felt hope soaring higher, unshackling me from the chains of despair. "It has to start somewhere," I said, feeling a new resolve taking shape within my heart. "And right now, I want it to start here with us." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow around us, I stepped even closer, daring to look into his eyes, eyes that had once shone so brightly, now simmering with the embers of what could be. "Let us be brave together, together, together," he echoed, a soft smile finally breaking through the clouds that had consumed his face, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. And in that moment, I realized revenge was never the path I wanted to take. The foundations of our family were built on the willingness to endure, to love, and to grow in the face of adversity. There was no more darkness looming over us. Instead, it felt as though a light had been set free, illuminating everything we had fought for. As we stood there hand in hand, I felt like I was on the cusp of something beautiful and fragile, yet real. The journey to reclaim what was lost would not be an easy one, but I had faith in us. And as I looked into Joe's eyes, I began to believe we truly had a chance to start anew, to treasure what mattered most. Each other the unfolding days after Joe's departure from my life marked the beginning of a journey I never planned, but desperately needed. I had never truly grasped the significance of the bond we shared until it started to fray. Sitting in my room one evening, my heart was heavy with regret that felt like lead. I could almost hear the echoes of our laughter from years past, tainted by the sharp memories of unkind words exchanged between us. My mind raced as I sought a way to rebuild what I had unknowingly fractured. Determined to repair our relationship, I began to formulate a new plan, focusing entirely on the aspects that had initially gone so wrong. To my surprise, reaching out to him regularly became both a challenge and a comfort. Setting up visits allowed us to reconnect deeply, transforming the void between us into budding conversations laden with meaning. One sunny Saturday, we met at the park, a place that held our childhood memories, filled with the warm laughter of carefree days when we were just kids. As I settled onto a weathered bench, the rustling leaves overhead seemed to cheer on our reconciliation. I spotted Joe walking towards me, his confidence noticeably swelling as he approached. The oppressive gaze of our parents had been lifted at the boarding school, and he seemed lighter somehow, as if the weight of expectation had faded. "Hey, Clara," he greeted, a genuine smile breaking across his face like dawn chasing away night. My heart fluttered, mixed with relief and a dash of lingering anxiety. "Hey, Joe," I replied, mirroring his smile, but feeling the gravity of the situation. "I've missed you." "I missed you too," he said, taking a seat beside me. The sunlight dappling through the trees illuminated his eyes and revealed a depth I had not seen before. He looked different, more himself, and I couldn't help but feel both proud and envious of the transformations he had undergone during our time apart. "How is boarding school treating you?" I asked, curious, but cautious about how much he was willing to share. He took a deep breath, clearly gathering his thoughts. "At first, it was tough. I felt isolated, like a fish out of water. But then I started to find my rhythm. I met people who challenged me, pushed me to think differently," he explained, excitement creeping into his voice. "I even joined an art club. You know how I always wanted to explore painting, but never could because of the pressure at home." A wave of guilt washed over me. I had been the one pushing for excellence, blinded by jealousy and what I thought was my own need to excel. "That sounds amazing, Joe. I can see how that would help you grow," I said, my voice softer now as I leaned in closer, sensing the importance of this moment. "Love it, honestly. It's so freeing to create," he added, his eyes reflecting a passion I had never seen. "I wish you could have seen me paint my first mural." I let my gaze drift toward the park's pond, the shimmering water mirroring the waves of emotion building within me. "You know, I think we were both trapped in that cycle of competition and misunderstanding," I said. The words felt weighty yet liberating, my heart pounding in my chest. I never realized how much I needed to step forward instead of leading from the shadows. "You were never my enemy, Joe." I paused, the weight of the past moments hanging between us like dark clouds threatening rain. "We were just blinded by the shadows of our parents' love, and I took it all out on you." Joe's expression softened, understanding blooming in his eyes. "Clara, I wish I could have seen you in a different light, too. I felt like I had to be perfect all the time, but it made me miserable. This time apart taught me something crucial. The real competition was never between us, but within ourselves. I want us to be a team again." His words poured over me like warm sunlight, and I felt a spark of hope ignite. As the seasons changed, so did our family dynamics. My resolve grew stronger, my old instincts replaced by the determination to be Joe's ally instead of his competitor. In my newfound dedication to him, I stood firmly beside him, advocating for him amidst our parents' concerns. "Why don't we let Joe choose the college he wants, instead of pressuring him to follow in our footsteps?" I would argue, my voice shaking with conviction whenever the topic arose during family gatherings. The more I defended him, the more I noticed their attitudes shifting. The unyielding chains of favoritism finally seemed to break, and I felt as if I was forging a path toward a new beginning. By confronting the highly dysfunctional patterns of our family, I understood that revenge had never been the answer. It was understanding and communication that would heal our wounds. On one fateful evening, with the golden hues of the setting sun spilling into our kitchen, I felt the anxiety bubbling in my stomach as I gathered everyone around the table, the smells of home-cooked food filling the air mingling with my apprehension. Joe joined us, looking nervously between our parents and me as we all sat down. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, each tick amplifying the weight of the moment. As I took a breath, my palms sweaty against the cool porcelain of my plate, I felt ready to confront the past. "We need to talk about how we have treated each other," I began, my heart racing. "I want us to promise to change for the better, to communicate, and to support one another, regardless of accolades." I could see my mother's expression shift, worry etched upon her brow as she chewed her food slowly, contemplating my words. The truth I discovered is that love cannot be unilateral. It needs to flow in all directions. Tears welled in my mother's eyes, glistening like morning dew clinging to grass blades. She looked at Joe before meeting my gaze, her voice shaky as she said, "I never meant to put you both in competition with each other." My father, always the stronghold, nodded cautiously, his traditionally stoic demeanor softening. "I've realized I need to do better as your parent," he admitted, his voice deep, but carrying an unfamiliar vulnerability. "We need to support you both in your own paths." My heart swelled as hope surged within me. The family meeting, which I had dreaded, began to transform into a healing experience. A wave of warmth enveloped me, each word exchanged feeling like a stitch in the fabric of our relationship, slowly, while tenderly mending the rift. The weight of the past started to lift, and as we spoke, something beautiful blossomed in the air, a redemption arc we were all experiencing together. By the time those sacred lessons from our near destruction sank in, I understood that I hadn't just taken back my power. I had forged a stronger bond with my brother. I vowed never to allow jealousy overshadow the love I held for Joe again. Each honest conversation replaced old insecurities with greater awareness, providing clarity on our intertwined paths. In allowing truth to unfold amidst chaos, our family emerged more united and resilient. Later that night, as I stood in my room staring out at the star-dappled sky, a sense of peace settled over me. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold its challenges, but instead of feeling daunting, it now felt rich with promise. What once felt like a fraying web had transformed into an intricate tapestry of understanding and forgiveness. The shadows that had once loomed large over our family finally receded. Joe's laughter now felt like a bridge, spanning the chasm that had divided us for so long. We were no longer left in the shadows. We had finally stepped into the light. It was an exhilarating realization, and as I closed my eyes, I silently vowed to embrace the future, filled with supportive family bonds and a deep, harmonious understanding of each other that would weather whatever storms lay ahead.